Hey, this is Darren from Property Prosperity. Today I thought we'd get serious about rainwater tanks. You probably haven't even thought about rainwater tanks, but if you are thinking about building, then it is something you have to consider. You might be a bit of a greenie, and that's probably a different situation. If you're a greenie and you've got your own house and you're thinking about saving the environment, then that's for a different purpose probably than what I'm talking about right now, because the reason that you're trying to put in a rainwater tank is to save water and to be good for the environment. Whereas generally when you're building, and particularly the houses that I'm building, I do a lot of developments and we're got limited size blocks. So to be honest, to be able to save the environment, hey, thanks for the like, thanks for joining. To save the environment, we're going to need more than a little tiny tank in the back of your backyard. It's probably not going to make a big difference, to be honest. It may maybe make you feel a bit better about things, but it's probably not going to have that bigger impact on the world. You're really going to have to have quite a big, sizable rainwater tank, which is going to take up quite a bit of your backyard. And so, probably more suited to the country or bigger blocks, on little tiny blocks that I'm talking about, 200 and something square meters. And so you've got a really small backyard. Trying to have a big rainwater tank going to fix that up. It's not really going to work. So what I'm probably more talking about is to meet council requirements. So if council requirements are, because the government decided it was a good thing to do to try and help protect the environment, they brought in a whole pile of different rules on ways we can try and do that. And one of those ways is to put a rainwater tank in our backyard. So all new houses, in South Australia at least, need to have a rainwater tank installed when you build the house. Generally, they talk about the minimum size rainwater tank you're going to need is 1,000 litre rainwater tank. That's generally across the board in Adelaide is the average for the minimum size. Saying that, a lot of people then make the assumption, or maybe they haven't even thought about rainwater tanks, but if they do realise they need a rainwater tank and it's required, when they're talking to the builder, they say to the builder, hey, they'll read through the quote and it says provision for rainwater tank. They go, awesome, that's exactly what we need. The thing to understand when it says provision for rainwater tank doesn't actually mean you're getting a rainwater tank. It just says that they've got a spot where you can connect your rainwater tank up to. So you're going to need the rainwater tank by law in Adelaide means it has to be, thanks for the like, is that it has to be actually plumbed to the house. And that's part of the whole, water saving mentality, is that if it's plumbed to the house, then we're going to use it regularly and we're going to save some water for the environment. So generally it's plumbed to the second toilet in the house. So you have the first toilet meaning the ensuite and then the second toilet meaning some other bathroom, or otherwise sometimes it's to a tap in the laundry, but generally, most of the builds I see, it's going to the toilet. And then you're going to need a pump on there to be able to pump the water to the toilet, and that's going to be connected up to the rainwater tank. And then the water from the roof goes into the rainwater tank. Any overflow then can go back to the street. And in theory, if you've got a good quality rainwater tank, it should be able to switch back to mains power if the power goes off, because otherwise, the power goes off, your pump's not going to work for your toilet and you're not going to be able to use your toilet. So you want to make sure the rainwater tank you're buying has the facility to switch over if the power goes off and switch back to mains water, and so you can continue to use your toilet then. And likewise too, if your pump just dies for whatever reason, it will switch back to mains water too. So you're not totally reliant on either the pump working or electricity working. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the provision for a rainwater tank. So when the builder talks about having a provision for a rainwater tank, that means they've just done all the plumbing that comes from the toilet to the edge of the house, and then from then on you have to be able to connect up your rainwater tank and connect it up to the house then. So one thing you might want to think about is if you are putting concrete down or any other sort of stuff, you want to make sure that all your pipe work is done before the concrete goes down, because you're traditionally, you're going to have the rainwater tank may not be right where the pipework is going to be, or it might be, a few meters away, or it might even be in the back of the yard. So make sure you put your plumbing down before you put the rainwater tank in. Thing to understand is generally the rainwater tank is going to sit on top of your concrete. So you need your plumbing first, then the concrete, and then you have to go to get the guy to come back and do the rainwater tank. So just understand there is a bit of a process involved in getting things done. So you got to make sure you follow the right order. Okay, so we've done our rainwater tank. The thing to understand then is, let's say we've rang up the council to say the minimum size rainwater tank we need is 1,000 litre rainwater tank. We've talked to our builder. He said, yep, we've allowed 1,000 litre rainwater tank. We're going to put that in the price, and that's all good. Or you've sort that out yourself, so that's great. The thing to understand is not necessarily just the minimum requirements you're trying to achieve. It's the minimum requirements are as an environmentally friendly thing is 1,000 litre rainwater tank. But on top of that, you also might get requirements as far as the council for not just saving the environment, but also they have issues with infrastructure at the moment. So what's happening is, a lot of these established areas, they built stormwater, drainage and runoff to be able to facilitate the number of houses that they allowed for, which was, bigger blocks, houses on big blocks, 800 square meter blocks or whatever. Now what's happened, everyone's knocking their houses down and subdividing to 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. So they're putting lots of houses on one block. When they determined what they needed for as far as stormwater runoff, they said, okay, well, most of the water is going to land on the people's backyard. So there's not going to be that much water that's going to be coming to the street. It's really only the roof water. So there's only really a requirement to catch the water that landed on the roof and put that to the street. So the way they would have calculated back in the old days is, how much water do we need? Is it going to be coming off of all these houses that we're building in this area? And then they just need to make sure, do we have big enough pipes to be able to catch all that water and send it all out to sea, basically? So what happened since then, though, we knocked our houses down and we subdivided and we turned our houses into, we've got multiple roofs on the one block, whereas before I had one roof in the one block, and then it's got, 2 or 3 or 4 potentially. So that's catching, it's a really efficient way to catch the water because it's not going into the soil, it's not just soaking into the soil, it's all going onto the roof. And then from there, all that water then is going straight to the street. So you're catching it really efficiently on a very, slippery surface. So it's going to go straight to the street. The other thing is, so that's called roof water. So that's a lot more water that's coming from the roofs of that block to the street because there's a lot more, area of the roofs, I suppose. The second thing is a thing called surface water. So surface water is the water that lands on your yard. And so in the old days, a lot of people's yards were just, garden bed and a bit of lawn, and that was pretty much it. Nowadays, people are paving their backyard and they're, putting fence sheds and a whole pile of different things in their backyard. So that water is way less likely to be soaking into their backyard. So what's happened now is council were concerned with the effects that you may have on your neighbours. And so what they're saying now is if you're building a new house, every drop of water that lands on your block, so just not on your roof, but also on your whole block, thanks to the like, has to go all the way to the street and go to the existing infrastructure of the stormwater drainage and runoff. So what that means is that you can't have any water landing on your backyard and going to any of your neighbours' blocks. And the reason why council don't want that is because potentially you can imagine if you've got a lot of water pooling up in your neighbour's backyard and could actually go under the fence and then maybe even underneath the footings of their house. And if it does that, you imagine over time, when you get a lot of issues with houses, a lot of it's water-based, and you don't need a lot of water, but over a very, very long period of time, they can just eat away at the foundations of your house, and then suddenly your footings can start pulling apart, and you can have cracking from your house. And it might be, the cracking of your house might be because of the neighbour next door. He's got water running underneath your house, causing this problem, undermining your foundations, causing your footings of your house to crack. So that's why council really stamped down on not only what they call roof water, but also surface water, so any water that lands on your block. So now they're requiring you to get any water that lands on your block and send it to the street. So the reason why this is important is because we're talking about catching all this roof water. So we've got so much more water now that's coming, we're catching when it rains, and that's all going to go to the street. And what you can imagine what that means now is there's so much water going in the stormwater runoff, and because they haven't designed it to be able to catch that much water, that's why nowadays if you see there's a big downpour of rain, all the streets all just flood, and they're just, you can almost can't drive through it some of the times. And so council this is a really big problem for council. They don't want to rip up all the roads and redo all their stormwater infrastructure. So the way they're trying to deal with this is they're trying to force you to hold the water on your block, and they know they can't force you to have big massive rainwater tanks that hold tens of thousands of litres of rain when it rains. So what they do is they want you to just what's called detaining the water. So you have retention tanks, rainwater tanks, and you have detention rainwater tanks. So when they talk about 1,000 litre rainwater tank, they're talking about retaining or holding 1,000 litres of rainwater that you can actually use in your house. On top of that, though, they might actually want you to detain some of the water. So that actually means slowing it down. So they don't want you to keep it there and use it for your washing of your toilet or anything, that sort of stuff. They just want you to hold that water there. So when there's this big, massive rain event, they want you to hold some of that water so the water doesn't go to the street so quickly, because their issue is their pipe's only so big, so it can only allow a certain bit of water through the pipe at once. And so if you can slow that water down that you're actually putting towards their stormwater infrastructure, then it gives it a little bit more time to let the water get out, and it's going to prevent that massive flooding that you see when there's a massive pile of rain that comes down. So then you might find the situation where even though the minimum requirement for a rainwater tank is 1,000 litres, they might want you to do a 2,000 litre or a 3,000 litre rainwater tank, because 1,000 litres of the rainwater tank is for retention, and 2,000 litres of the rainwater tank might be for detention, actually slowing up the, so that you could then potentially have 2 rainwater tanks, one for holding the water and then another one for just slowing the water down. Or the other options, you can actually have 1 rainwater tank, but it's actually, instead of a 1,000 litre and a 2,000 litre to slow it down, you might have 1 3,000 litre rainwater tank, which will do both. And so that means that a third of the rainwater tank is just for holding the water. So you'll see that bottom third will always be full of water, always ready to fill up your toilet when you need to flush the toilet. The top 2/3 will be empty all the time. And the reason they're empty is because when you suddenly have a big downpour, when rain comes down and it catches in the roof and sends it straight to your rainwater tank, that top 2/3, it's going to fill up before it sends the water to the street as the overflow. And so the benefit of that is you've got 2,000 litres of water it's going to hold before it sends it to the street. And then likewise, if your rainwater tank is totally empty, it'll fill up the 1,000 litre first, then it'll fill up the 2,000 litres. And that example, it would hold, 3,000 litres of water is going to hold before it starts sending it to the street. So you can see the benefit as far as council is concerned. That means they don't necessarily have to upgrade their infrastructure as soon as they otherwise would, because you're holding a lot of that water on your site, but you're not holding it forever. You're only holding it for, and it might only be a matter of minutes. You don't have to hold it for that long, because that's going to make a massive difference as far as the council infrastructure goes. So hopefully that's made sense to everybody, and hopefully you found some use out of that. If you've probably learned more than you've ever wanted to learn about rainwater tanks tonight, but hopefully someone's found that interesting. If you have, then click on the like button. If you haven't, then it doesn't matter. Still click on the like button anyway. I'd really appreciate it. And if you've got someone that's thinking about building and they don't really haven't even thought about rainwater tanks, or they've thought about rainwater tanks, but you're worried that they might not know much about them, then click on the share button. I'm sure they might find it interesting. And if you've got something you'd like me to talk about in a future episode, then click on the comment box and put a comment in there. If you think what I've done is pretty cool and you want me to keep going, then click on the comment box too, because I really appreciate your feedback. So thanks guys for joining, and I look forward to talking to you again next time. Bye for now.